Hey man, there comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes something chilling, that the same woman who once adored him, who used to look up to him, who once said she couldn't imagine a day without him, now seems to hate him with a passion that feels almost personal. But it's not love turned into hate, it's control turned into rage. Because when a woman can no longer control you, when she can no longer dictate how you feel, how you react, or how you respond, she doesn't just walk away, she tries to break you. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your emotional detachment exposes something she can't stand: her own loss of power. At first, it's subtle. She starts acting colder, distant, detached. She'll test to see if she can still get an emotional reaction from you. A jealous glance, an angry word, a desperate call. When you don't give it to her, she panics internally, because your calmness is no longer about indifference, it's about dominance. Not the kind that comes from arrogance or manipulation, but the kind that comes from emotional control. And for a woman who's used to running on emotional influence, that kind of self-possession feels like suffocation. She realizes she can no longer use her most powerful weapon, your empathy. So she shifts tactics. She begins to create chaos where there is peace. If she can't control your emotions through affection, she'll try through confusion. She'll say one thing and do another. She'll pull you close only to push you away again. She'll make you question your sanity, your memory, your perception of reality. Because when she can't control you directly, she'll try to make you lose control of yourself. That's how women test the strength of your frame, not through arguments or logic, but through subtle emotional sabotage. And if you're not centered, you'll start to unravel piece by piece, trying to fix what was never broken, trying to prove what doesn't need proof. But here's the truth. The moment you stop reacting is the moment she realizes her influence is gone, and that realization terrifies her. Because deep down, what most women crave isn't just love, it's power over how you love. They want to feel that your emotions orbit around theirs, that your peace depends on their presence. But when you rise above that, when your calm becomes untouchable, it threatens the foundation of her identity in the relationship. She can't stand to see you unaffected because your peace reflects her chaos. Your silence mirrors her insecurity. Your strength becomes a reminder that her manipulation has failed. That's when she shifts from testing to punishing. She might start rumors, twist stories, play the victim, or try to rally others against you. It's no longer about love. It's about revenge. She wants you to feel what she feels, powerless. Because in her mind, if she can't control you through affection, she'll control you through destruction. That's why you'll often see women who can't handle rejection turn vindictive, spreading lies, ruining reputations, acting out of spite. It's not because they hate you, it's because they hate the loss of control. You've stepped out of her emotional matrix, and now she's doing everything in her power to pull you back in. But the secret is, she can't. When you refuse to react, you become something she can't manipulate. Your silence becomes a mirror she can't distort. She'll throw words at you that used to hurt, but now they bounce off. She'll try to bait you into emotional arguments, but your calmness will make her rage look foolish. You'll notice how quickly her energy shifts when she realizes you're no longer playing the game. That's when she'll try to make you look like the villain, because in her mind, the only way to justify losing control is to convince herself that you're the bad guy. But don't defend yourself. The more you explain, the more power you give back. Let her narrative collapse under the weight of her own inconsistency. You see, control in relationships isn't always obvious. It doesn't always look like shouting, demanding, or threatening. Sometimes it looks like guilt tripping. Sometimes it looks like emotional withdrawal. Sometimes it's her tears that hold you hostage. She'll cry, not because she's hurt, but because she knows you'll break your boundaries when you see her in pain. But once you realize that tears can be a tool, that guilt can be manipulation, you stop falling for it. You stop rescuing her from emotions she created. And that's when she'll panic, because your strength now exposes every tactic she once used to keep you weak. The hardest part for most men is understanding that love doesn't mean allowing control. Love isn't measured by how much chaos you can tolerate, it's measured by how much peace you can maintain. When she can't control you anymore, she'll accuse you of not caring. She'll say you've changed. She'll call you cold, distant, detached. but what she really means is I can no longer move you the way I used to. She's not mourning the relationship, she's mourning the influence, and that's why your detachment feels like cruelty to her. Because for the first time, she's forced to confront the truth. Her power over you was never love. It was dependency disguised as affection. This is why strong men often get labeled as toxic, controlling, or narcissistic. Not because they actually are, but because they can't be controlled. A man who doesn't react emotionally, who doesn't explain himself, who doesn't bend to manipulation, terrifies women who rely on emotional power dynamics. She'll say you're emotionally unavailable, but what she means is that you're emotionally disciplined. She'll say you're too calm, but what she means is that her chaos no longer gets a response. She'll say you don't care, but what she really means is that she can no longer control the way you care. And that distinction is everything. So when she starts trying to destroy you, understand it's not about you, it's about her inability to accept that you no longer belong to her emotional world. You've elevated beyond her control, and that makes her feel irrelevant. But here's the beauty of it all. Destruction doesn't work on a man who's detached. You can't ruin a man who's already built his peace internally. You can't shake a man whose validation doesn't come from anyone outside himself. You can't manipulate a man who's seen the tricks, played the game, and walked away undefeated. That's the kind of man every manipulative woman fears, the man who refuses to be controlled. When a woman realizes she can't move you anymore, her entire strategy begins to unravel from the inside. At first, she tries to pretend she's fine, acting indifferent, posting happy photos, claiming she's never been better. But underneath that performance lies a deep frustration, a gnawing discomfort that she can't shake. Because in her world, emotional control is her currency, and you've just stopped spending it. Every time you don't reply to her bait, every time you don't flinch at her silence, every time you refuse to argue, it eats away at her. You've become the calm in the storm she's trying to stir. She'll keep escalating, subtweeting, gossiping, showing up by accident, trying to trigger a reaction in any way possible. But your composure becomes a mirror reflecting her chaos. And over time, she begins to hate that mirror. Not because of what it shows, but because she can't escape it. The silence becomes too loud, the stillness becomes too heavy, and the control she once held over you begins to rot in her hands like something dead. This is where most men fail. They break right before she does. They can't handle the emotional tension of staying unbothered. They give in, they text back, they try to explain, they try to clear things up. But the truth is, the moment you break your silence, you give her life again. Because for her, even a negative reaction is a win. It means she still has influence. That's why you must understand that silence isn't a tactic, it's a declaration of power. It's not that you're ignoring her, it's that you've stopped participating in her game. Your lack of reaction tells her one brutal truth: you no longer belong to her emotional world, and that truth hits her harder than any insult ever could. Because once a man stops caring about how he's perceived, he becomes untouchable. And when a man becomes untouchable, a woman who thrives on control begins to self-destruct in slow motion. Her next move will be desperation disguised as confidence. She'll act like she's thriving, new people, new hobbies, new freedom. But watch closely, it's not growth, it's deflection. Because when someone is truly at peace, they don't need to perform it. She's trying to prove to herself that she doesn't need you, but every performance is a confession. The louder she pretends she's moved on, the more you know she hasn't. Because true detachment doesn't need an audience, it's silent. So while she's busy seeking external validation, you're busy building internal validation. You're in the gym, in your grind, in your purpose. You're reclaiming your time, your peace, your mind. And that's what breaks her the most. Not that you've moved on, but that you've leveled up. You've become the kind of man who doesn't chase what left him. You attract what aligns with him. That shift in energy flips the entire dynamic. She used to be the one observing your reactions. Now she's the one reacting to your calm. The irony is that the more she tries to destroy you, the more she destroys her own image of herself. Because in her attempt to make you look weak, she ends up revealing her own instability. The more she talks about you, the more people notice that she's still emotionally attached. The more she plays the victim, the more obvious it becomes that she's still haunted by the loss of control. Your silence becomes a statement, the world understands without you saying a word. People begin to see the difference. Her noise versus your peace, her chaos versus your composure. And even she begins to see it, though she'll never admit it. She'll start to question herself. Why does he seem fine? Why isn't he broken like I thought he'd be? Why does his life look better without me in it? Those questions sting worse than rejection, because now she's no longer fighting you, she's fighting her own reflection, realizing that in trying to destroy you, she only exposed herself. But the true victory isn't in her regret, it's in your growth. Because by not engaging, you didn't just protect your peace, you evolved into a man who can't be emotionally blackmailed anymore. You've learned that power isn't about control, it's about composure. It's about being so secure in yourself that no one else's chaos can shake your core. The same woman who once thought she could manipulate you into reacting now finds herself haunted by your silence. Because silence is a language of strength, and once you master it, every manipulative person in your life starts to lose their grip. You become the calm force that people can't figure out, can't provoke, can't dominate. That's when you realize you never needed to destroy her back. The simple act of walking away with your dignity intact was enough, because peace, when protected fiercely, becomes the most devastating revenge of all. When you reach that point of complete emotional control, something profound happens inside you. You stop being defined by what left. Her presence, her approval, her affection, even her betrayal, they no longer hold the power to define your worth. You realize that her chaos was never a reflection of your failure, but of her own inner storm. You stop taking it personally. You stop analyzing her motives. You stop trying to understand why she did what she did, because you finally see it for what it was, a test of your self-respect. Every man who's ever been through the fire of emotional manipulation eventually arrives at this realization that pain is not punishment, it's purification. It strips away your weaknesses, your emotional dependency, your need for external validation. You become a man who's no longer looking for peace in another person. You are the peace. And the moment you reach that level of stillness, women who thrive on control find nothing left to feed on. You've become emotionally invincible. The storm no longer moves you because you've learned to be the eye within it. As your energy shifts, people start to feel it before you say a word. The same woman who tried to test your patience, provoke your reactions, and feed off your emotional responses now sees you through a different lens, one that both attracts and unsettles her. She'll wonder how you managed to evolve without her. She'll question why you're not angry, why you don't care, why you've become untouchable. But the truth is, you didn't change for her, you changed because of her. You turned pain into power, rejection into redirection, heartbreak into higher purpose. You learned that the masculine core thrives not on control, but on restraint. It's not about winning every argument or proving every point. It's about remaining calm in the face of chaos, grounded when everything around you trembles. You've mastered that balance now, and that makes you rare. Because while she's still trying to figure out how to manipulate emotions, you've learned to master yours. Eventually, she'll come back. Maybe not physically, but energetically. She'll start appearing again in subtle ways, liking your posts, bringing your name up to mutual friends, finding excuses to re-enter your orbit. But what she's really doing is checking if she still has influence. What she'll find, however, is a wall she can't climb. The version of you that once over-explained, over-invested, and over-loved no longer exists. You've buried him. What stands in his place is a man who listens more than he speaks, observes more than he reacts, and walks away more than he argues. You've stopped seeking closure because your silence has already written it, and while she might interpret your calmness as coldness, the truth is much deeper. It's peace, real, earned peace. The kind that doesn't need validation, doesn't demand revenge, and doesn't chase endings. Because you've realized that when a man is whole within himself, nothing external can break him again. Now the world starts to reflect this new version of you. Your focus deepens, your standards rise. You start attracting opportunities, people, and relationships that align with your new vibration. The same traits that once made you easy to manipulate, your kindness, empathy, and loyalty, now become your strengths. Because they're backed by boundaries. You no longer give those qualities to everyone. You've learned the difference between connection and control, between attention and manipulation. You've realized that not every woman deserves your vulnerability. only the ones who earn your respect. That's how you transform from being emotionally reactive to emotionally selective. And that shift doesn't just protect you, it elevates you. Because the man who doesn't react to every wave ends up ruling the tide. Eventually, she'll realize that her attempts to destroy you did the opposite. They created you. Every insult, every manipulation, every silent treatment, every game she played became a lesson that forged your strength. You learned to see through emotional bait, to detach from chaos, to find clarity in silence. You learned to stop negotiating with disrespect and start protecting your energy. And now, you're standing in a position she can't touch because your growth was born from her games. That's the greatest irony. In trying to break you, she ended up building you. The man she once tried to control has become the man she'll never control again. And while she might move on to others, she'll never find another version of you. Because true emotional sovereignty is something that can't be faked, taught, or replaced. You either earn it through pain, or you never experience it at all. And you, my friend, have earned it in full. Once you've reached that level of stillness, you begin to understand that all along, this was never about her, it was about you, about your growth, your evolution, your awakening. She was simply the catalyst that forced you to meet yourself. Because when a man goes through emotional chaos and comes out calm, when he faces manipulation and remains unmoved, when he's tested by love and refuses to lose himself, that's when he finally steps into his true masculine frame. You begin to see that life's greatest teachers don't always come in the form of mentors or books. Sometimes they come disguised as heartbreak. Sometimes they come as women who expose your weaknesses, not to destroy you, but to show you where you've yet to grow. And once you've learned those lessons, you stop chasing validation from anyone. You start walking differently, slower, calmer, but with an unmistakable sense of purpose. You've become what few men ever reach, grounded, free, and dangerous in your peace. What makes your peace dangerous is not aggression, it's unpredictability. She no longer knows what moves you. She can't predict what will trigger you because nothing does anymore. You've stopped being a puppet to her emotional strings. You've stopped seeking fairness from people who thrive on imbalance. You've stopped explaining truth to those committed to misunderstanding it. That's the kind of detachment that shakes people to their core. Not because it's cold, but because it's controlled. When you can look into the eyes of the woman who once played games with your emotions and feel nothing but neutrality, that's when you've won. That's when you realize that peace isn't the absence of emotion, it's the mastery of it. You still feel everything, you just no longer let those feelings control your actions. And that kind of control is what turns ordinary men into leaders, not leaders of others, but of themselves. Ironically, the more peaceful you become, the more power you project. People start to notice it before you even speak. Your presence commands attention because it's rare to find someone who doesn't need anything from anyone. Women who once dismissed you for being too calm now find themselves intrigued. They sense something in you, an energy they can't manipulate, a mind they can't read, a strength they can't tame. And that's what creates attraction on a different level. Not the superficial kind that comes from looks or status, but the deep, instinctive kind that comes from emotional dominance. Because when a man no longer chases, when he no longer explains, when he no longer plays the emotional tug of war, he becomes a mystery. And mystery is the essence of masculine allure. The irony, the same woman who once tried to control you will now crave your attention, not because she loves you, but because she's addicted to what she no longer owns, your focus. But by now, your focus is sacred. You no longer give it away recklessly. You've learned that your attention is the most valuable currency you possess. Wherever you direct it, grows. And when you stopped giving it to her chaos, your life began to bloom. You built yourself from the ground up, piece by piece, in silence. You invested in your mind, your purpose, your body, your peace. You became your own source of stability. And now, every woman who enters your life can feel that energy, that unshakable presence that doesn't flinch, doesn't beg, doesn't react. It's the quiet confidence of a man who's seen what losing himself looks like and has vowed never to go back there again. And that's what makes you so different now. Not bitterness, not resentment, but calm self-respect. You've learned that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because nothing is more powerful than a man who refuses to fight battles that no longer matter, and so the cycle comes full circle. The woman who once thought she could control you ends up haunted by the man she helped create, the one who no longer needs her, no longer reacts to her, no longer chases the illusion of love she offered. You, on the other hand, walk away with something far greater than revenge. You walk away with peace, focus, and power. You've learned that you don't have to destroy anyone to win. You just have to stop giving them access to you. Because the truth is, not everyone deserves to experience your energy, especially those who once tried to weaponize it. And now that you've mastered yourself, the world opens up in ways you couldn't imagine. Every step you take from here on out is guided by clarity, not emotion, by purpose, not pain. And if she ever sees you again, she'll realize what she truly lost. Not just a man she couldn't control, but the only man who could have handled her chaos with calm. And that realization will burn deeper than any heartbreak, because while she was busy trying to destroy you, you quietly became the man she'll never forget. Now that you've walked through the fire and come out the other side untouched, something inside of you changes forever. You start to realize how much energy you used to waste trying to prove yourself, trying to convince her that your love was enough, trying to show her that your intentions were pure, trying to make her see your worth through her distorted perception. And then you realize how unnecessary it all was, because your worth was never something she had the power to give or take away. It was something you were born with. It was always there, buried under the noise, hidden beneath your willingness to please. But the moment you stopped fighting for her validation, that worth began to rise to the surface. Now, you walk differently. You move with quiet confidence. You don't need to announce your value because it speaks for itself. The man who once sought her approval has become the man she'll never have the privilege of validating again. The irony is, once you stop chasing love, you start to attract everything you once chased. Peace, respect, admiration, they all begin to flow toward you effortlessly because you've stopped forcing them. The energy that used to be scattered, arguing, explaining, defending, is now focused entirely on your growth. You've become magnetic, not because you're trying to be, but because you no longer care to be. And women sense it immediately. They feel that calm power, that masculine stillness that's not born of arrogance, but of understanding. It's the kind of energy that says, I don't need to prove my worth, I am my worth. That's the paradox of emotional control. The less you give, the more you attract. Because what truly draws people in isn't noise, it's presence. And when your presence no longer demands attention but commands respect, everything around you begins to shift in your favor. But don't be fooled, this peace didn't come cheap. It cost you the version of yourself that begged, that pleaded, that tolerated disrespect under the illusion of love. It cost you sleepless nights, emotional exhaustion, and the painful realization that love without respect is manipulation. You had to lose yourself to find yourself again. You had to let go of someone you thought you needed, only to realize that what you truly needed was your own strength. That's the beauty of heartbreak. When faced with discipline, it becomes transformation. It's the furnace that burns away weakness and forges clarity. Most men never get there because they fold under emotional pressure. But you didn't. You stood firm. You faced her silence with composure, her manipulation with patience, her absence with focus. And because of that, you earned something no relationship can ever give you: mastery over yourself. And here's the truth that will sting her the most. She'll never meet another man like you. She'll meet men who give her attention, men who chase, men who praise her endlessly, but none who make her feel safe without control, none who remain calm when tested, none who can walk away with peace instead of anger. Because the kind of strength you now carry isn't common, it's refined through pain. It's built on nights of silence, mornings of discipline, and days of choosing to stay composed when everything inside you wanted to explode. That's the kind of strength that makes women question everything they thought they understood about men. Because while she's out there chasing temporary validation, you're building permanence, not in people, but in your purpose. She may never say it, but deep down she knows she didn't lose a man. She lost an empire in motion. And as you continue to rise, her memory begins to fade into something distant, not bitter, not painful, just neutral. You stop replaying the story. You stop wondering what could have been. You stop needing her to regret it, because you finally understand that closure doesn't come from her apology. It comes from your evolution. The silence that once hurt now heals. The distance that once felt like punishment now feels like freedom. And every time she crosses your mind, it's only as a quiet reminder of how far you've come. You've learned that the real victory was never about making her miss you or regret losing you. The real victory was becoming the kind of man who no longer needs revenge, validation, or emotional control. You won't destroy her image. You won't expose her lies. You'll do something far more powerful. You'll outgrow her, and that in the end is the one thing she'll never be able to control. When a man reaches the point where his peace cannot be disturbed, something divine starts to take root inside him. He begins to understand that control over self is the highest form of power in existence. Not money, not status, not dominance over others, but control over himself. The ability to stand in front of chaos and not flinch. The strength to walk away from what insults his peace without bitterness or noise. The discipline to choose silence when anger burns. That's the kind of power that rewrites your destiny, because it separates you from the average man, the man who still argues, who still reacts, who still lets the emotions of others dictate the direction of his life. You've become something rarer. You've become a man guided by purpose, not impulse. You no longer chase women, you attract peace. You no longer argue to prove a point. You let the truth stand untouched. You're not moved by rejection because you know that what's meant for you won't need convincing to stay. That kind of composure cannot be faked. It's earned. And what happens next is beautiful. Your entire world starts to align with your new vibration. Your circle gets smaller but stronger. You find yourself uninterested in small talk, meaningless relationships, or anything that drains your spirit. You start craving solitude, not because you're lonely, but because solitude feels like home. In that silence, you plan, you build, you heal, you grow. And in that process, you begin to attract women who operate on the same frequency, women who don't want to control, but to connect, women who understand that love isn't about possession, but about peace. You stop settling for temporary attention and start demanding lasting alignment. You realize that the more grounded you are, the more selective you must become, because not every woman deserves access to your focus, your discipline, or your energy. You've learned that your presence is valuable, and only those who bring calm, respect, and consistency deserve to experience it. Meanwhile, the woman who once tried to destroy you begins to realize what she's done. She sees glimpses of you in other men, but none of them carry that stillness, that gravity, that quiet intensity that you now embody. She misses your presence not because she loved you, but because your presence made her feel safe, seen, and centered. She'll never admit it, but deep down she knows she lost something sacred. She traded a man who was grounded for the thrill of control, and now she's left with chaos, disguised as excitement. Every man she meets after you will reveal what she lost. She'll find charm, but not stability, attraction, but not presence, affection, but not leadership. And that realization doesn't hit all at once. It eats away at her slowly, like time punishing arrogance. Because the truth is, a woman never truly gets over a man who is emotionally unshakable. She can replace your face, your name, your body, but never your energy. But here's where you truly rise. You stop caring whether she regrets it or not. Her realization is no longer your concern. Her karma is no longer your curiosity. You've detached so deeply that even her memory no longer stirs emotion. You see her now as part of a chapter that taught you something profound, the importance of never giving someone else control over your inner state. You've learned that love without self-respect is slavery, and peace without boundaries is an illusion. You walk with a calm that's almost intimidating now. You don't seek closure because you understand that life gives you closure through evolution. You don't hold grudges because bitterness is just emotional debt that drains your soul. You simply move on, slowly, gracefully, and with absolute certainty that you'll never let anyone rewrite your peace again. And that, more than anything, is the mark of a man who's finally free. And this freedom changes everything. It changes the way you move through the world, the way you love, the way you lead. You start living intentionally, not emotionally. You don't rush anything anymore. Not love, not success, not revenge. You understand that everything comes to a man who's patient enough to build and disciplined enough to wait. You no longer chase energy, you embody it. You don't try to convince anyone of your worth, you simply are it. You live by one simple rule: peace is the prize. And when that's your mindset, no manipulation, no heartbreak, no loss can shake you. Because the man who protects his peace is the man who controls his destiny. And now, when people try to pull you into chaos, you simply smile, not out of pride, but out of understanding. Because you've already played that game, you've already lost yourself once, and you'll never do it again. You've become untouchable, not because you built walls, but because you've built wisdom. As time moves forward, your silence begins to echo louder than any words you could have ever said. She feels it everywhere, in the quiet moments before she falls asleep, in the empty spaces of her day where your presence used to live. What haunts her isn't the loss of you, it's the realization that she never really knew you at all. Because the version of you she thought she controlled, the emotional, reactive, open book man, was only a fragment of who you truly were. The man you are now doesn't need to announce his worth, doesn't chase validation, and doesn't beg to be understood. You've ascended into a form of masculine peace that feels both foreign and magnetic to her, and as she watches from a distance, what breaks her isn't your success, or your calm, or your silence, it's your indifference. The fact that you no longer need closure, no longer need to be seen, no longer need her to know how much she's lost. You've left her to wrestle with her own silence, and that is a war she cannot win. There comes a moment, often late at night, when she scrolls through her phone, looking for distractions, only to land on old memories, pictures, messages, moments that once made her feel powerful, now make her feel hollow. She realizes that she once had access to a man who was loyal without condition, who gave without limits, who loved without ego, and she squandered it for attention and control. That realization doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in slowly, like a fog that never lifts. Because while you've been healing, growing, and building, she's been stuck in a loop, repeating the same patterns, chasing the same highs, only to end up emptier each time. She thought she could replace you easily, but she soon discovers that most men are just copies of one another. What you had was rare, not perfect, but real. And real always hurts more to lose, because it doesn't come back twice. By now, you've transcended the entire dynamic. You no longer see her as the villain, and you don't see yourself as the victim either. You see the whole story for what it truly was, an awakening. You understand that, without her attempts to control you, you would have never learned emotional independence. Without her chaos, you wouldn't have discovered your calm. Without her rejection, you wouldn't have learned to validate yourself. The pain she caused was the price of wisdom, and it was worth every moment, because now, you don't fall for surface-level affection anymore. You look for consistency, peace, and character. You don't chase beauty, you observe behavior. You don't rush into love, you study energy. You've turned every emotional wound into emotional intelligence, and that, ironically, is the greatest revenge, because while she's still playing emotional games, you've mastered emotional reality. And the world starts to notice this shift. People treat you differently. Women who once overlooked you now feel drawn to your calmness. Men who once doubted you now respect your discipline. You've become the kind of man whose presence changes the temperature of a room without saying a word. Because you're not chasing external validation anymore. You've found internal alignment, and that's rare. That's what makes you stand out in a world built on performance and pretense. You've stopped needing to prove anything. You just live with purpose. You understand that strength isn't loud, it's consistent. That power doesn't shout, it whispers. And that control doesn't come from domination, but from detachment. You've become the man who can lose everything. The woman, the relationship, the validation, and still walk away whole. Because now, your sense of worth comes from something eternal. Your discipline, your peace, your truth. And maybe one day, she'll see you again, not in person, but through the filtered lens of her memories. She'll wonder how you managed to stay so calm, how you built yourself from nothing, how you never retaliated or sought revenge. But you won't be there to answer, because by the time she realizes what she lost, you'll have long outgrown the version of yourself that needed her recognition. You'll be living in alignment with your purpose, surrounded by peace, respected by those who see your value without needing to control it. She'll look back and realize that she didn't just lose a man, she lost her mirror, the one that reflected her best and worst self back to her. And that's what will haunt her forever. because you, the man she once tried to control, didn't just walk away. You elevated beyond her reach. And in that silent rise lies the most devastating truth of all. She didn't destroy you, she refined you. When you reach this level of peace, you start to notice how differently you interact with the world. You no longer take things personally. People's moods, their reactions, their words, they all roll off you like rain on steel. Because you understand that everyone is projecting something, their fears, their insecurities, their desires. You don't absorb it anymore, you simply observe it. That's the quiet power you've built, emotional neutrality. It doesn't mean you don't care, it means you don't let external chaos dictate your internal state. This is the kind of peace that makes you magnetic, not because you're trying to be mysterious, but because people can feel that you're operating on a frequency they can't disrupt. The same woman who once tested your patience now sees a version of you that doesn't flinch. The world hasn't gotten easier, you've just gotten harder to move. You've become the calm that others search for but rarely find. Your success begins to follow that same pattern, quiet, steady, inevitable, because now your energy isn't being wasted on emotional battles that go nowhere. You've reclaimed your focus, and with that focus comes results. You wake up earlier, work harder, think clearer. You're not motivated by proving anyone wrong anymore. You're driven by the desire to fulfill your potential. That's what separates men who evolve from men who stagnate. While others are still trying to get even, you're getting ahead. Every failure becomes feedback. Every rejection becomes redirection. And as your life begins to rise, you realize something profound. Peace and progress are connected. The calmer your mind, the sharper your aim. The less you react, the more you attract. You've learned that emotional control isn't just spiritual strength, it's practical power. It's what allows you to move through life with precision, while others stumble through it with noise. And with that progress comes clarity. You begin to see the patterns of life with crystal precision, how every loss led you to strength, how every rejection carved out wisdom, how every heartbreak refined your standards. You start to understand that nothing truly valuable in life comes from ease. It all comes from endurance. You've stopped resenting the pain because you've learned to use it. You no longer see heartbreak as destruction, but as divine reconstruction. Every wound you endured was shaping your foundation. Every silent night you spent wondering why she did what she did was strengthening your mind for something greater. You see now that her attempts to control you were never about her, they were about your evolution. The universe used her chaos to reveal your calm. You were never losing her, you were finding you. That's why the peace you have now feels different. It's not borrowed, it's built. And now, as you look back, you realize that the man you were before she tried to control you. That man could never survive the world you're in now. He was too trusting, too open, too eager to please. You had to lose him to become this version of yourself. You had to be broken to learn how to build differently. The love that once made you soft has now made you strong. You still have compassion, but it's protected. You still have empathy, but it's disciplined. You still have love to give, but now it's selective. You give your time to people who bring peace, not problems. You give your energy to those who reciprocate, not drain. You no longer fall for potential, you wait for consistency. You no longer fight to be understood. You move in silence and let your growth do the explaining. That's the ultimate transformation, when the same things that once destroyed you now define your strength. And this strength is something that no woman, no heartbreak, no betrayal can ever take from you again, because it wasn't given by anyone, it was built from within. You finally understand that the purpose of love isn't to complete you, but to reveal where you're incomplete. And now that you've filled those gaps with discipline, purpose, and peace, you no longer need love to survive. You choose it only if it aligns. You've become the kind of man who doesn't chase women. He attracts loyalty. Who doesn't demand respect. He commands it. Who doesn't try to win people back. He lets time show them what they lost. And that's what truly breaks her in the end. Realizing that she didn't just lose a man who loved her, she lost the man who would have led her into peace, because now you've ascended beyond the battlefield. You don't fight for control, you don't fight for attention, you fight only for your purpose, and that's a war you'll never lose again. When you finally reach that stage, the stage where peace becomes your identity, something incredible happens. Life itself begins to bend in your favor. Opportunities start finding you because your energy no longer repels them. You're no longer desperate, impulsive, or emotionally chaotic. You've cultivated stillness, and stillness attracts everything that's meant for you. You walk into a room and people feel it, the grounded presence, the quiet self-assurance, the lack of need. You've become magnetic, not by trying, but by being. This is what most men never reach, because they never endure the silence long enough to find themselves in it. But you did. You faced loneliness, you faced heartbreak, you faced rejection, and instead of chasing noise to escape it, you sat with it until it shaped you. That's what makes you powerful now. You've learned that solitude doesn't mean emptiness, it means clarity. You've discovered that peace isn't found in the presence of others, it's created in the absence of chaos. And the irony is that once you reach this state, women can sense it instantly. Not through your words, not through your looks, but through your energy. They feel it when you don't rush to reply, when you don't seek approval, when your eyes aren't begging to be understood. It disarms them, because most men operate from a place of need, needing validation, needing affection, needing reassurance. But you've transcended that. You no longer chase, you choose. You no longer plead, you pause. You no longer prove, you embody. And that level of detachment doesn't make you cold, it makes you sovereign. You've reclaimed authority over your emotions, and that's something that both confuses and attracts women at the same time. They can't play games with a man who doesn't play back. They can't manipulate a man who sees through illusion. They can't control a man who's already mastered himself. That's when attraction becomes respect, and respect becomes devotion. But here's the deepest truth. The reason you've truly won isn't because she regrets losing you. It's because you no longer care whether she does or not. You've outgrown the version of yourself that needed external validation. You don't measure your worth by who stays or who leaves. You measure it by how calm you remain when everything around you shifts. You've become the kind of man who finds fulfillment in his mission, not in attention. You find joy in progress, not in praise. You wake up every morning driven, not by what you've lost, but by what you're still becoming. And that's what truly separates you now. The emotional independence that can't be shaken by love, loss, or loneliness. Because the man who doesn't fear solitude is the man who commands presence wherever he goes. That's the paradox of masculine strength. The less you need from the world, the more it gives to you. And when you finally look back, you'll realize it was never about her at all. She was just the spark that ignited your transformation. The pain she caused was the teacher that pushed you toward evolution. Every tear, every silence, every sleepless night was preparing you for this moment. The moment where you no longer chase peace, but are peace. You've become emotionally bulletproof, spiritually untouchable, mentally disciplined. You can love without losing yourself, care without clinging, walk away without resentment. That's the highest form of masculine maturity, when you don't need control, because you've already mastered acceptance. You see through illusions, but you don't resent them. You understand the darkness in others, but you don't absorb it. You've reached the point where your heart is open, but your boundaries are firm. You love deeply, but you never abandon yourself again. So if she ever crosses your mind again, don't hate her, don't pity her, just thank her, silently from a distance. Because without her chaos, you would have never built your calm. Without her games, you would have never found your ground. Without her leaving, you would have never met yourself. You see, her greatest mistake wasn't breaking your heart, it was forcing you to evolve beyond her reach. And now, you live differently, you move slower, you speak less, you react rarely. You've built a life so peaceful that anything chaotic feels foreign to you. You've become the man you were always meant to be, not through validation, but through loss. And as she lies awake some nights wondering why you never came back, she'll realize the truth too late. You didn't move on to another woman, you moved on to yourself. And that, my friend, is the kind of power that no one can take away.